Okay, last time we left off talking about three questions I wanted you to think about. Pause and think. So, which organelle in the cell does photosynthesis? It's the chloroplast, and inside there is the chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll is what helps convert the sun's energy that is captured inside the chlorophyll into energy the cell can use. So, light energy, sunlight, chemical energy, which turns it into sugar. And what organisms do photosynthesis? Autotrophs make their own food, like plants. We don't make our own food, we consume our own food. So that is just the end of that part. So let's go ahead and look at the next notes we're going to look at. Okay, so if we look here, we see energy and life. Energy, the defined word of energy, is to do work. Living things depend on energy to maintain homeostasis. Remember, the homeostasis is where everything stays in perfect unison. The cells inside, remember, we're still talking cellular level here. Without the ability to obtain and use energy, things wouldn't exist. Living things would die. So for us, we obtain our energy by consuming food. Plants obtain theirs by obtaining sunlight that converts it into energy that it can use. Where does the energy come from? So it's chemical energy where it comes from. Even the food that we consume as humans. Energy comes from many things like light, heat, and electricity. The energy we need to use in our cells and even plants and animals all is ATP and ADP. Cellular activities are powered by these chemical fuels, and that's what comes out of photosynthesis and respiration. One of the principal chemical compounds that living things use to store or release energy is ATP. It's adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Good. So here's what an ATP molecule looks like. It has adenine group, a ribose group, which is a sugar. OSC is talking about a sugar, and 3 phosphates. This is all chemical structures. This is what a chemical structure looks like. Chemical equation where the molecules and compounds put together, adding them together with the yield. This is actual chemical structure, what ATP actually looks like. It has an adenine group, which looks like this, a ribose group that has all of these 5 points, and 3 phosphates. So here it says 5 carbon sugar, 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. ATP is used by types of cells and their basic energy source. Plants and animals alike need sugar to be converted into energy it can use. And ATP is the way it does that. ADP is adenosine diphosphate, so that means that it's going to be similar in structure to ATP. This is where one of the important differences is that there's 2 phosphate groups instead of 3. This is the key to which cells store energy. So if we look again, let's keep going, and then I'll go back if we need to. A cell can store small amounts of energy by adding a phosphate group to the ADP molecule, producing ATP. ATP is like a fully charged battery, ready to power the machinery of any cell. So here is ADP, where it has the adenosine, the sugar, and then the 2 phosphates, which would be di for 2. This means that the battery is not fully charged because you're missing one more phosphate. If I add that phosphate, it gives me a fully charged battery, and ATP is a fully charged battery. So here, showing you the difference between ADP and ATP. What happens when a phosphate group is removed from ATP? It goes back to being not fully charged and not really as beneficial to the cell as ATP. So releasing energy from ATP, energy is stored in ATP, is released when ATP is converted into ADP in a phosphate group. So when energy is stored, it's ATP, then it releases a phosphate, causing it to be ADP. Cells can add and subtract a 3rd phosphate group, giving it a way to store and release energy as needed. So remember, if it's storing it, it's ATP. If it's using it, it's ADP. And we're looking at those phosphate groups on the end. Most cells only have a small amount of ATP, enough to last for only a few seconds of activity. That's why we have to keep consuming food, why plants have to keep consuming the sun energy and converting it to use. ATP is a greater molecule for transferring energy. It's not good for long-term energy storage. So keep that in mind. So again, here's a picture of the cycle. You have the adenosine, then you have the phosphates. It's going to lose a phosphate and become ADP. Then it's going to come back around and pick up a phosphate group and become ATP, which can be stored, used, stored. This is where it's using it. That's why it lost one. Okay, biochemical energy. When we look at biochemical energy, ATP carries just enough energy to power a variety of cellular activities. These are things we've talked about. Active transport, those protein pumps that require energy. Movement. Cilia are little hairs on the side of organisms, small organisms, microscopic organisms. Flagella is like a tail. And then muscles. Light, like in fireflies, that's bioluminescence. That's chemical energy released. The characteristics of ATP make it an exemplary useful molecule that is used by all types of cells in their basic energy source. You have to have ATP, and ATP turns into ADP to be used and then returns to ATP. Remember, this takes lots of energy. All right, we'll go ahead and stop there and continue tomorrow or soon. Plan to have a test on Friday.